So I have an area over here that I'm wanting to turn into a place where I can grow some peas. And right now it's just a bunch of grass. As you can see over here behind me, I have one area over here that's starting to be turned into soil or to bury the grass. And this is one way that you can quickly get an area that's covered in grass or weeds and turn it into a place where you can start growing something. So before I started to spade or turn under the sod, I went ahead and ran the lawnmower over the grass area here, and to take off any of the long strands of grass that were sticking up. If the grass is coming up when you turn it over, and the grass can still stick up and get some light, it'll continue to grow. And so you don't want that. You want to be able to bury it completely. And so it's best to mow or chop down as much as possible. Mowing's the ideal, just to get it real low so that you can easily bury the grass that is there. So you can see this area here has already been turned under. So this is kind of what the finished result's going to look like. So I'm going to take my shovel here. So this is a pointed shovel. Other types of shovels might work. This is the only kind that I have, so the only kind that I really have experience with. But something that's fairly sharp, but doesn't necessarily have to be super sharp. I just like to keep the edge sharp on here with a file. So it's a good idea to kind of work backwards, moving this way rather than trying to turn around and cut into the sod that's here. So you want to be able to point your shovel. The first is going to be the hardest to get in, but once you got it turned over here, it'll be much easier to come back a little ways, maybe 6 inches at a time, and to pull forward into that. So I want to be just stepping on it here. You may hit a rock. If you do hit a rock, kind of pull it back a little ways and keep pushing in at a little bit more of an angle. Keep working it in. So and then you want to pull it back. Take the chunk of sod and dirt out, and you want to lay it beside the hole so that the sod is facing the hole. And then you just want to take the tip of your shovel then you want to take the tip of your shovel and use that to flip back into the hole. And kind of work it around in there so that the grass is facing completely down if possible. And kind of just take the tip of the shovel and knock it down a little bit, loosen it up so it'll kind of lay down a little flatter. And then you move aside to the next one. Usually a nice forceful, oomph down to put all your weight on there and just get it down all at once. It's okay if you're coming up underneath some of the other ones. Just be careful not to flip them over. Use your toe or something to push stuff around if need be. Flip it up like that and down. You can step on it too if need be. Push it down. And just work across your bed, however little area at a time. And sometimes you don't get it all. Just shove that down and keep burying it too. If you see some grass that's sticking up, kind of push it over and step on it. Then start over again. Get the next row. rock here, so I'll take out the rocks as I see them. So then once you got your whole area turned under, then you want to go ahead and take a rake, or if you have a little small tiller, yeah, you could go over the surface. You don't want to go deep and turn stuff back over. You want to keep all the weed seeds and all the weeds and grass, the tops, buried. But you can you could let it sit here for maybe a week and come back if you have time, and then go over it just real lightly with the tiller, and that will kind of break up all the roots and the clumps and things like that, and kind of allow you to smooth it out, make a flat surface out of it. You could also do that with the rake too, and I'll just kind of show you a little bit how to do that with the rake. So this one area here is kind of starting to dry out a little bit, and so it's going to make it a little bit easier to work with and to smooth out. Alright, I'm going to use a garden rake here. And just kind of pound it a little bit, break it up. Take the high points down and fill in the low parts there. See some grass sticking up, you can just step on it with your heel of your boot or shoe and make some dirt over it. Might find some rocks at this time, raking into the rocks, and you can grab the rocks up and take those out. As far as rocks goes, it's good to have like a 5-gallon bucket around. You can scoop up some rocks and throw them in there. Use the back of your rake, the flat side, to kind of rake stuff around and smooth it out without grabbing a hold of the dirt and the sod chunks and maybe pulling them over. You don't want to be dragging over it too much. You're going to catch the tines of the rake on some top of the grass and lift it up and pull it over. So you want to kind of use the back for going back and forth a little bit, or just a kind of a whack it down and smooth it out a little bit. So that's the first step in preparing a new area to grow things in. And then so the next step is to kind of inoculate the soil, to add some amendments, anything that you want to do there. And then if you have compost that you want to add as a mulch layer, or if you want to use straw or peat moss or whatever you want to use as far as a mulch layer on top, then you want to add that last. So when we start a new garden bed and we're first starting to grow things in the soil, a lot of the soil is deficient in some major minerals, and so it's important to add some of those in. And so one of the things that it's good to add in to soil when you first start working with it is calcium. And here I have some calcium carbonate, and this is also known as agricultural lime. It can also come in a more of a gray form as well. This is the white form. So that's one major mineral that is easily leached out of soils that have been rained on for a lot of time. They may be low in calcium, so this is something that can stimulate the biology and get things working, and also provide more calcium to the plants that you will be growing there. Another mineral that we can add is boron, and boron goes with calcium as it helps to transport it into the plant. And boron is also very leachable from rain, and so that's something that usually most soils are deficient in, so we're going to add a little bit of that. And another thing that we can add to our soil when we're first starting out, and this is also good every year as well. This is linardite, and this is a mine product that has 3 parts to it. It has humic acid and fulvic acid and humin, and all those 3 parts have different jobs to do. These parts are naturally produced by fungus as it breaks down organic matter, but it takes a very long time for it to produce it, and it doesn't produce very much at one time. You get a little bit in compost because of the fungus that is usually working in there, if there is fungus in the compost that you have. Not all compost has much fungus in there, so adding some of this can really stimulate the biology in your soil and to help convert minerals into a form that's more stable and less leachable. So we're going to start, in order to best apply these, it's best to mix these into like a compost or a peat moss or something like that, as it helps to evenly spread it out over the area, because small quantities of a powder is very difficult to spread out over a large area. And so we can use compost to kind of buffer it and to kind of create a substance that it can be mixed in evenly to. Also, when it's a little bit of breeze, can easily blow a fine powder like calcium around and blow it off, and you lose it. So you need to make it more heavy and bind to something. So compost that's a little bit damp, but not super. You don't want it to be wet, but just a little bit damp can really help to keep it from blowing off. So I have a little tub here that I can mix these up in. So I'm going to take some compost here, put some of that into here. Just put some gloves on here so I don't get my hands all dirty, and kind of break up some of the clumps in here and make it more of a fine texture, and pick out anything that don't need to have that in there. See a few worms already in here. So I'm just kind of putting some in the bottom here. I'm going to put the amendments on top so that they don't get stuck to the bottom, and it's much easier to incorporate them when they're added to the top of the compost. So I'm going to take out some measuring devices here, measuring spoon here, and put in a couple tablespoons of calcium in here. A little bit on the surface there. And then I'm going to put about a tablespoon of the linardite in here as well. Kind of a brownish, really dark brown powder. Sprinkle that in there. Don't need a whole lot. And then put about a teaspoon of the boron in there, or the borax here. It's not 100% boron, so you don't have to. It's not extremely important to be too careful about the measurement of it, but it can get toxic after certain levels, so you don't want to put too much. That's why I'm only putting about a teaspoon in here. Okay. So now we have our minerals and the linardite in there. So we'll just kind of blend those together here. Just work it around in here. So smash any clumps and break it up, and you don't want it to be clumped, or any of the powders to be clumped up together. A nice thorough mix in the compost. Okay, so now we have our blend here, and so we'll take it out to our new garden area and to distribute that evenly over the surface of the soil. Okay, so I got our tub here of our powdered amendments, so I'll be sprinkling that evenly over the bed. You just want to take a handful and just kind of open up your fingers a little bit and sprinkle it over. You want to start kind of slowly at first and kind of see how far it's going and try to get it evenly over the whole bed. So now we can add also more of a liquid amendments. So one of the things that's a good biological stimulant is molasses. The sugar in there, plus all the minerals that it has and all the other good things that are high concentration in molasses, helps to stimulate the biology and gives them minerals that they can use to build their bodies with. So another thing that we can add is a source of minerals to help the biology to build their bodies with. We can use something like Himalayan salt, or if you can find a sea salt solids. So that can be very useful, just a small quantity mixed in to help the biology to get established. And another thing that we can add to inoculate the good biology in there, to make sure that we have good bacteria of known strains that we know are very beneficial, and to increase their populations, is to use a bioinoculant. This is the Spectrum, which has about 20 different bacteria strains in there that we know to be useful. So you can add a little bit of that in there. You could also use a mycorrhizal inoculant as well. I don't have any, but that's something else that you could use. So one of the things that we found when you do a liquid thing, especially if it's going to be like a foliar spray or something, but it's much more beneficial to have very clean water. That doesn't necessarily mean lacking in soil or particles or anything like that, things that would be floating around. But it means that hard water is a problem, and water that has been softened with salt, so there's a higher salt content that's going to lower the effectiveness of the items that you're trying to apply to the soil, such as molasses or The biology is definitely going to be affected by that, and some of the minerals aren't going to be as readily available when you have a lot of either salt or calcium mixed into the water. So having tap water with chlorine in it could also be a problem. So you may want to let it sit out in an open container or bucket for several hours to let the chlorine evaporate. So one of the good sources that I've been collecting is rainwater. Rainwater has a very good quality to it, and so I've been just collecting it in big barrels out in the yard and been saving it. So that's what I have in my watering can right here. Watering can is very good for mixing things up and applying it. I have a little sprinkle head on here that I can put on there that I can use to sprinkle over the surface and get it kind of evenly distributed. Okay, so I'm going to start with adding some molasses. This is just normal molasses that you'd use for cooking or something like that. I got it in a gallon jug. Actually, this molasses, there was molasses in this jug, but I also got some molasses in a 3-gallon bucket at one of the ag stores, so that can be a little bit more economical. So I'm going to put about a tablespoon in here. Doesn't have to be super accurate. Just pour a little bit in there. And then I'm going to take about a teaspoon of the Himalayan salt here. Put that in there, and then I'm going to use about a 1/16 of a teaspoon of this, so just a small little pinch. So I'm just take a little bit in there. Just need a tiny little bit, and apply just to dump that in there. Okay, and I'm just going to take a paint stick or some kind of stirring device that you can use to go back, stir it all up very well. So the best way to stir ingredients like this is to have kind of a back and forth motion. A circular kind of swirls it and it doesn't tend to incorporate it. You want to kind of fight against the flow of the water. So nice back and forth, and you can go side by side, side to side a little bit. Kind of scrape the bottom as much as possible as well. So I have about a third of the watering can filled up in here. So for a small little plot, that's probably about sufficient. So about 2 gallons works well for about 100 square feet. So once the bacteria come into more of or get rehydrated, they come out of dormancy, and when there's a good sugar source in here for them to eat, then they start to multiply and do what they normally do as far as duplicating themselves and using up the minerals that are in both the molasses and the sea salt or the Himalayan salt. Okay. So we'll go take this out to the garden plot out there and apply it. So now we have our liquid amendments and inoculants. So the biology, I'm sure, is in here starting to multiply. So we'll use the little sprinkle head here and do a kind of an even sprinkle over the whole thing. Go back over it a couple times till this is used up. Okay, so we got that emptied out on the bed here. So now the last thing that we can put on there, this is optional, you don't have to, but a good layer of compost as a mulch on the surface can also to increase the give the biology something to eat, and the fungus, and starts getting that working in the soil, so we can increase that population, and also to keep the soil moist, so it keeps the evaporation of the soil down.